then marching inland against Mexico City itself. As you go inland, you have to go up into mountains. With the enemy's capital in American hands, it was believed, Mexican political life would be paralyzed and the Mexicans forced to the conference table. Now, Veracruz fell after a brief siege, so we took Veracruz. Then, in a nice little thrifty war, expertly conducted, and one of the reasons it maintains for our success was because of our absolutely superb artillery pieces. But we invaded Mexico, took Mexico City. It had exactly the crisis-imposing effects that they suspected it would. And get this, here's what Santa Anna says as their 30,000 soldiers kept falling back against the Americans' 11,000 soldiers. Santa Anna says, "I believe if we were to put our batteries, our fortifications, in hell, the damned Yankees would take them from us. No matter how far they fell back, no matter how they entrenched, I mean, they're in defensive position, they're in rugged terrain, they're going up mountains, they're going backwards in towards Mexico City, 30,000 men against 10,000 Americans, they couldn't stop the Americans from advancing. The Americans killed about 11,000 Mexicans, and Winfield Scott, America lost 2,000 or 3,000. Well, it's like 2,000, I think, out of their 10,000 troops were killed altogether. Maybe it was less than that. It might have been like 200. But anyways, that's not too important to what we're doing right now. The fact is, we advanced, we took Mexico City, occupied it. September 14th, 1847, Scott's army entered the Mexican capital. They had achieved a remarkable success. The resulting Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed in February 1848. Under its terms, the Americans received Texas, with its boundary stipulated as the Rio Grande, because Mexico used to claim the Rio Grande was inside their territory, it was the next river up. So there was that patch between two rivers that was contested all the time. So the boundary was stipulated as the Rio Grande, and also America gained California and New Mexico. In exchange, the United States assumed the claims of American citizens against the Mexican government, whatever that means, and also paid Mexico $15 million. So how's that? How's that? We occupy your northern territories. We occupy your capital. We make you sign a treaty giving us land, and we give you $15 million. Maybe we'd be more well justified in going to the Mexican government and saying, here's a copy of our Constitution. It's really high time you implement that, because you've got a big patch of land over here that's not really safely governed. We could have done that, I guess. But instead we were like, you're not governing the place, we're taking it. The Americans also gained an unexpected political nightmare. The question of whether the newly acquired territories would be slave or free haunted the nation for the next decade. 1848, we acquire massive new territories. Massive new territories. So, what are we going to do about admitting these to the Union? Up till now, the Missouri Compromise has kept a balance. So at this point, we're going to leave American military history and the evolution of warfare. We will return. So don't worry, we're actually going to get more from that wonderful account. So now we see that the Mexican-American War played a crucial role bringing more land into the Union. Now we're going to learn a little bit about the culture of the South, the distinctive culture of the South, the peculiar culture of the South. Daugherty, the book we were just taking from there, asserts then that the Mexican War, taking all that land, is what led to a political crisis that precipitated the Civil War. We now go to Paul Johnson's A History of the American People. We take now from page 307, quote, "The general thrust of the Judeo-Christian tradition tended to be anti-slavery, and that was why it had slowly disappeared in Europe and in the early Middle Ages, slavery that is. Now, I do want to add something right there. I have a little video. I think it's 45 seconds or a minute long. You should go and watch the whole video. It's a pretty good little interview. But it says that the roots of Christianity are more Hellenic than Hebraic. And I assert right here and now that to the extent that the Christian religion emphasizes the value of the individual and the individual's importance, with disregard for everybody and everything, and God included. Every individual has value, and then they say God values every individual. But every single individual has supreme value in this religion because of its total dependence on the Hellenic culture, on the culture of Greece. It's totally just a synthesis of ideas at the time with Hellenic ideas and Hebraic ideas. So, to the extent that it is pro-individual, to the extent that it is against slavery, to the extent that it says every human life is valuable, to the extent that that's true, it has Hellenic roots. Certainly isn't anything in the Old Testament that would lead them to that, is there? Ultimately, the American religious impulse and slavery were incompatible. Now, I say that's nonsense because maybe the American religious impulse, maybe you make a case like that, but not any religious impulse. Religion as such isn't incompatible with it. Just this one, because it has particular roots of Christianity, which have roots in an area, the Roman Empire, and Rome was completely the brainchild of Greece. Christianity is more Hellenic than it is Hebraic. So, if the American religion had an impulse against slavery, which clearly it did, it is from its Hellenic roots. Hellenic is Greece, Greece, Helen of Troy, Hellenic. Continues. Hence the Second Great Awakening, with its huge intensification of religious passion, sounded the death knell of American slavery, just as the First Awakening had sounded the death knell of British colonialism. So, now we've got Paul Johnson saying that the death knell of slavery was religion. He continues. Religion would have swept away slavery in America without difficulty early in the 19th century, but for one thing, cotton. It was this little, two-syllable word which turned American slaveholding into a mighty political force and so made the Civil War inevitable. So it's because slaveholding was a political power, because of the money involved in the economy, because of the productivity of America's economy, and all the entrenched economic interests in cotton, intertwined with the slaves trade, intertwined with slaves as such. So that's what he says, that's what it is that made it inevitable. So far from being the tension over the war with California and Mexico that we saw earlier. And cotton, in terms of humanity and its needs, was an unmitigated good. So he's saying cotton's fabulous, yet it comes from the evil world of slavery. Thus do the workings of mysterious providence balance good with evil. Until the end of the 18th century, the human race had always been unsuitably clothed in garments which were difficult to wash and therefore filthy. Cotton offered an escape from this misery, worn next to the skin in cold countries, as a complete garment in hot countries. The trouble with cotton was its expense, very expensive. Until the industrialization of the cotton industry, to produce a pound of cotton thread took 12 to 14 man-days, as against 6 days for silk, 2 to 5 for linen, and 1 to 4 days for wool. So cotton was much more expensive than silk to produce. This is before the industrialization of the cotton industry. This acted as a spur to mechanical invention, right? Now, some people are worried about when the price of a commodity gets too high, what are we going to do? Like it says here, that acts as a spur to invention. Look at the price of that commodity. There's an opportunity. It's a spur to invention, so don't worry. Now, there was the invention of some spinning machines in England, the Arkwright spinning machine, and the Hargreaves jenny in England of the 1770s meant that, whereas in 1765, 500,000 pounds of cotton had been spun in England, all of it by hand, by 1784, that's one generation, the total was 12 million, up from 500,000, all of it by machine. Next year, the Boulton and Watt steam engines were introduced to power the cotton spinning machines. This was the Big Bang of the first industrial revolution.